us, and funny thing, he moved out and we became friends after that. And we've been connecting ever since. I know Grant attends First Church? He's taught Sunday school there, and he's been connected there for a while, but I asked him to come here and give his testimony, what I know of regarding his marriage. And they're just those stories that you hear with people that, like, wow, I wish more people knew about this. We talked about it last time, but miracles happen more than just physically. They happen relationally. And God can bring together what you thought was impossible. This is a perfect example of that. Let's pray. Lord, I'm thankful for the hearts of men to get together, just experience life and growth. I'm thankful for Grant. Lord, and we all have a story. We all have things that we've gone through. And I'm thankful for his willingness to share his life, or to challenge to share difficult seasons we've been through. Lord, I'm thankful for his openness and sharing that. And we love you. We thank you for this time. In your name, amen. Amen.
My name is Grant Shookman, and I help men have a deeper connection with their spouse in marriage. And today, what I'm going to do is provide you with some practical tools that you can start using today that will actually help reduce stress, that will actually help you argue less in marriage, and it will also, actually these tools will, if you use them correctly, will cause her to biologically desire you. Okay? Amen. There we go. So I want to do a practical exercise first. I'd like this to be a little bit interactive. There are going to be times throughout our conversation when I ask a question, and I would like, if it applies to you, I'd like you to answer back, and it's going to be pretty much the same answer every time. So I want you to start by saying this word after me out loud. Say the word ah. Ah. Okay, that was terrible. I know you guys can do better than that. All together, a little bit louder. Say ah. Ah. Okay, all right, I want you to say the word do, D-U-E. Do. All right, put them together. Say the word I do. I do. Okay, that's going to be the answer to the question. So I've planted a volunteer in the audience so that we can give an example. Can I have a volunteer? Joshua, thank you for volunteering. So what we're going to do is you're going to see this as an example how this works, and as it comes up again, you're going to repeat the process. So Joshua, here's an example question. Is there anybody in the audience who happens to have twins?
I do.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Leland probably did because he's from New Orleans.
I did.
All right. So practice this a couple more times with these questions, and I want everybody to say it at the same time. If you get really excited, you can raise your hand. Is there anybody here who would like less stress in their marriage?
I do.
Okay. Is there anybody here who believes that the three things that I mentioned will help you have a deeper connection with your spouse?
I do.
All right. There we go. But I actually polled nearly 50,000 people. And I wanted to make sure that the information that I was giving back to you guys from my story, from my testimony, was really relevant to what it is that men need to know. So how many of you believe that in those 50,000 and the answers that I got back, I saw a pattern?
I do.
Oh, that was terrible. You were so close. You were so close. One more time. How many believe I saw a pattern in the answers that I got back in my polls?
I do.
Okay. That's right. I did see a pattern. So the next question I'm going to ask, what I'd like you to do is we're going to take about 30 seconds to do this. When you hear what it is that we're going to be talking about this morning, I want to make sure that we're addressing your needs. And so what I'd like to do is ask you, what is it that you would find helpful practically? Think about your existing situations. What is it that you would find helpful to learn about in marriage? So go ahead and shout them out.
What to talk about when you have nothing to talk about.
So
Women love communication.
can we call that communication? There we go. Does anybody
No, I dated for 12 years.
Oh, man. 12 years.
What to talk about? Does anybody believe that communication came up on the list?
I do.
What else? What would be helpful for you to learn as we're talking about developing a deeper connection with our spouse?
Consistent intimacy.
So, intimacy. And tell me a little bit more about that word intimacy. What do you mean?
Well, I think we all have those moments where we've got a connection with our wives, but then there are those, and I've just, even through my own marriage, sometimes it feels like a roommate more than a spouse, and there's walls, and the idea of just getting out of the wall and keeping it consistent.
Who else in here identifies with that?
I do.
Very good. What else? Is that it?
I think consistently anticipating and meeting your wife's needs.
Yes.
So, how to meet her needs?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
You're not always the same.
So I'm going to tell myself, Sean, I'm partially deaf, and I thought you said how to consistently anticipate a meeting. I'm sorry.
But it's related.
It's related.
Has anybody learned that one?
That's why I laughed.
Our New Orleans boy answered. There we go. So,
I know if you move, you can help.
so this is our agenda. This is what it is that we're going to learn today, and it is summarized on the handout that I gave you. I would ask you that as we're moving through these topics, we're going to cover ideas. I'm going to give you tools. Please take notes. I'm going to give you information on how to get additional tools. I'm going to bring you back to our website. The video cameras, we're producing this as a video training, so that way you can go back and see it again, or you can pass it along to somebody else who needs it. But on the agenda, you'll see that this is what we're going to cover. And what I want to make sure is that what it is that we've listed here for you gentlemen that we cover throughout our conversation today. Fair enough? I'm going to tell you about one of the low points in my marriage. So to tell you a little bit about who I am, I'm a business consultant. My last role, I was the interim COO for a medical firm. I've been married for 17 years, actually 16, I apologize. We actually met before we were born. What I mean by that is our mothers were roommates at Cincinnati Bible College and Seminary when they were fresh out of high school. So I literally have pictures of my wife and I when we're sitting on the sidewalk at 3 and 4 years old. So to a certain extent, we have, that fairy tale, right? Well, as you can see from these numbers here, the shortest time we have somebody married is 18 months, and don't let that deceive you. That was one of a cumulative number, so it's not that low. And the highest we've got here is 30 years. Congratulations. And we've also got someone who, across several marriages, has 39 years. So what I'm saying is that you guys are going to hold me to the fire. So you've got some experience in this room, and that's good. When I say that we had the storybook marriage, we kind of all know how that story goes and what it's like. So what I'm going to do is share with you some of the low points. I'm going to share with you some of the tools that I've learned. And again, our goal is to make sure that you have some practical things that you can literally start using today. So I'm going to rewind. Josh had mentioned that I moved out of the condo, and what we did is we had bought a house, and this was back in 2006. And so we had moved in with her parents. At this point, we didn't have any kids. We were married in 2002, so at this point, we were going on four and a half, almost 5 years. So a very young marriage. So at this point in my career, I was working second and a half shift. So I was going in at 3 in the afternoon and working till sometimes 1 in the morning. And she was working half shift. She was getting up at 3 a.m., had to be at work at 4 a.m., and she would be finished by 2:30. So as you can imagine, if I'm getting off work and coming home at 1 and going to sleep at 2, literally an hour later, she's getting up to get ready to leave at 3. And when you're in a situation where you don't have kids and you're living with your in-laws, is there anybody here that thinks that could be a bad situation? Yeah. So what had happened in that period of time is that I got to the point, and this is just me personally, where the pressure of that environment of not being able to see her on a regular basis, and then when we did see each other, we were stressed out, we were tired, our communication was terrible, we were arguing, we were fighting, as it literally became suicidal. I can't tell you it's been how many times, but it's been more than once in my life when I've loaded the gun with the intention of pulling the trigger. This was one of those times. I'm a person, it took me a long time to realize that I can hear God's voice and hear what it is that He's saying. And I didn't know that. I grew up in a Church of Christ that was relatively conservative. I was taught you don't mess with witchcraft, Ouija boards, and mediums. And so the baby kind of got thrown out with the bathwater, and I didn't understand that that's part of what the Bible talks about is the gift of prophecy, just to simply be able to hear the Heavenly Father. And so I will tell you that in this period of time, He went silent on me. It scared me to death. And my perspective was, God, I have to go. Like, I don't want to die. I even said out loud, something inside of me has broken that I didn't know that can break. And it's like a mirror, it's like glass. When that breaks, you can't put it back together. And so it was in this period of time, my wife actually went out of town on a business trip. I'm not one of those people who believes if you make a decision, you go halfway, you go all the way. When she came back from that business trip, I had literally moved my things out of the garage and into my parents' home. And I was sitting there, and I literally severed the relationship. And what I said to her was, I realize now that we simply made the biggest mistake that we've ever made. And I said, I believe that you believe the same thing. And so I said, I'm setting you free. And I knew what God's Word said, but this is what I was saying to Him. In all honesty, I said, God, you know what I'm doing. If you don't want me to do what it is that I'm doing, say something. And I knew what His Word said. I knew what His Word said about divorce, but that's my position. The only little blip on the radar that I would get is when I was driving down the road, this song would come on the radio, on Christian radio, and it said, hold on, help is on the way. And I just didn't know what to do. So I moved out. I got to the point where I would only communicate with her via email. No phone calls, no texting, no talking, no meeting, nothing, only email. I severed it, and I severed it hard. And so one day, so that was in November of 2006. Fast forward to January of 2007, so about 60 days. In that 60-day period, I had served her with divorce papers. She refused to sign them. She didn't believe it was right. What happened is that I sat up in bed one morning and I heard this thought come into my head. And it said this: if you keep going, this is what you're going to get. So at this point, this is why this is a cliffhanger of a story, because I'll tell you at the end how I responded and what happened coming out of that situation that led us up to today. So, now that I've got everybody totally depressed, at this point, I'm going to give you tools which are going to prepare you in advance for knowing what to say and how to say it. In turn, making you smooth in your communications with your spouse. Does anybody in here think that smooth communications with your spouse would help?
I do.
I do. Here we go. So, how many of your spouses would describe you as smooth? Anybody? So, okay.
Depends on the definition.
Probably me neither. Sure. Well, when we've got Josh falling asleep in the bathroom, there might be elements of that are smooth. So, what I want to talk to you about, and this is the first tool, is understanding difference in people and personalities, and this is very applicable to marriage. You can separate people into one of two categories, either relational or transactional. And so you'll see that. You don't have to write that down because it's already on your sheet. But here's what that means. A transactional person is typically what we call involved in production. They're about the numbers. They want to get the job done. They want to see it go, and they're good at that. They're good at follow-up. They can keep it moving. Is there anybody in here who's transactional? Raise your hand. So typically the transactional people know that they're transactional. Relational is on the other end of the spectrum. What that means is, let's go have lunch. Let's talk about it. The transaction will take care of itself, right? If we just keep nurturing the relationship, everything should be fine. Who here in this room is relational? Raise your hand. Okay. I want to talk to you transactional people for a second. How do you feel about those relational people?
They're smooth.
The power of life and death is in the tongue. No, seriously, how do transactional people feel about relational people? Think in business.
Maybe at odds?
Yes, absolutely. The transactional people at work. How do you feel, the relational people that are in your workplace, how do you interact with them? What do? They drive you crazy. Yes, they drive you crazy. So let's flip the tables here. The relational people. What about, how do you feel about the transactional people? Slightly different, but what is it?
They're just busy work guys. No interest in the overall outcome.
They're way too busy. Okay? So typically the answer we get is a little bit frustrated. The relational people get frustrated with the transactional people because they don't have time for a relationship, or they don't take the time for a relationship. So here's another question. For those of you who are relational or transactional, and you know which one you are, how many of you are married to someone who's the other one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It usually comes out to about 50% because that's your divorce rate. Think about that. So what do we do about that? This is the first tool. We're going to talk about what it means to be relational. And so the definition of relational is to form a relationship so thick that no transaction can break the relationship. Make sense? So each person on each end of the spectrum has to become a little bit more of the other one so that they can make room for the other person. And here's how you know when you get there. When you can look at both ends of the spectrum and neither one of them you find annoying. Make sense? So this is your first tool. If you understand that you're relational or transactional and your spouse is the other one, you need to do what you can to become more relational. I have a deeper teaching on this. As a consultant, I'm a certified facilitator in transformational leadership, and this is what the entire training is based on. It's actually called Relational Leadership by Ford Taylor. Just know that there are resources available through our organization that go deeper on this subject. So for the purposes of time, we'll move on. The next piece is love languages. Pretty much everyone here has heard of love languages. I just forgot his name. Dr. Gary Chapman wrote the book. How many people here know their love language?
I do.
You're the one that's been married 18 months. Seriously though, how many people, does anybody else know their love language? Okay. Next question. Do you know the love language of your spouse?
I do.
A couple more? Okay. So this is key. This is one of the points that was absolutely pivotal for me. But here's the thing. It wasn't pivotal for me because it was something that I needed to learn. It was pivotal for me because it was something that I needed to understand about my spouse. Now, I'll tell you, my wife is a lot smarter than I am. If we can admit that when she actually is, it's a big step in the right direction. But seriously, she has an IQ that's off the charts. Her gifting is administrative. I mean, she is transactional as they come. Me, I'm relational. I have a very high EQ. So we're almost opposites on these scales. Do you think that we have the tendency to drive each other nuts? Absolutely. Especially with her need for nesting. She wants to have things clean, straight, order. That's how she feels stable and feels emotional comfort. And the relational guy is out talking to here. I'm always on the phone. I'm on social media. And the house is a mess, right? So this is the challenge that I ran into with my wife. Her name is Laurel. Laurel has 2 love languages that compete for each other at the top. You transactional people, do you want to guess which ones they are? Quality time and deeds of service. So what I skipped a little bit was what the 5 love languages are. They're not written here. I would encourage you to look them up. But you have quality of time, deeds of service, words of affirmation, physical touch, and gift giving. So these are the 5. So my wife had 2. And what's important about the fact that the 2 were competing is if we have quality time, but I haven't done any deeds of service, did it really have an impact? Does she feel loved? If I've done deeds of service, but we're not having quality time because I'm so busy keeping up with everything, does she feel loved? No. Very challenging. Now me, on the other hand, I also have 2 competing love languages at the top. Somebody take a guess at what they are. There's 1. There's 2. So for me, if I have words of affirmation and no physical touch, I have difficulty perceiving love from someone. And vice versa. So now, in general, if we're not aware of these things, what is our tendency when it comes to communicating love to one another? How do I love, if my love language is, let's call it words of affirmation, and her love language is quality time, how do I end up communicating love to her? Typically,
Her grant.
what's that?
You moved to her grant.
Well, naturally I do it backwards. I try to communicate love to her through my love language. And so I'm giving her gifts, right? And she's looking for quality time. And so I just want to communicate that this is a tool that really fits into this point of knowing communication and even what to talk about. It's critical. It changed what it is I did just the other day, and I'm not kidding you, the other day. I've told her many times, and she'll say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. And I'll give her an example. I'll say, come up to me, hold my hands, look me in the eye, and say, I see what you're doing. You're working very hard. I appreciate that. I'm proud of you. Keep going. Then dump everything on me. Right? Because once I perceive love, then all of a sudden I have the ability to hear what she's saying on the other side. And so I'm telling her, like, I need this. Times are really stressful, when this is happening, literally just this last week. And so I go out the door, I'm headed to my job, and what does she do? She brings out the water bottle that I forgot. What was it? A deed of service. It made me so angry. I got so angry, I literally threw the water bottle. And I had to come back to her and apologize and explain what it was. I said, I begged you for physical touch and words of affirmation, and naturally, you didn't even catch it, that you followed me out the door with the deed of service. I was like, God bless you for the water bottle, I needed it. Unfortunately, it broke when I threw it across the driveway. So I didn't have it, but at the same time, again, you can see how knowing these things function. And so what I can tell you is that over time, as I've been communicating these things with her, we've had breakthrough. We're going to speed up a little bit here as I'm watching the clock. So how many people have heard of waffles and spaghetti? Men think like waffles, women think like spaghetti. It's too deep to go into. It's part of the transformational leadership training. If you're interested in more of it, come back to us at the One Earth website, oneearthsolution.org. But here's the gist of it. With women, they think like spaghetti because everything is connected to everything. It's like having a computer open with 4 different browsers, each with 10 tabs, with 6 more programs going in the backwards. What does that do to your CPU for those computer people?
Overloads it.
It absolutely overloads it. So when we say everything is connected to everything, the dog is connected to the bills, which is connected to the laundry, which is connected to whether or not we got the mowed grass, to whether or not we were time on church, to whether or not what is it that we're going to buy for the first present for the grandkids. We don't have grandkids. When you ask a woman, if you don't believe me on this, ask a woman if she thinks like that, and she'll admit it every time. So I want you to think like that, men. So that's when we talk about spaghetti, that's what we're talking about. Everything's connected to everything. It's very high intensity all the time. With men, waffles are in the shape of what? If you look at it from the front. There we go.
Grid.
A grid. They're boxes. Men typically think about one thing at a time. Family, work, chores. You have a box for each child. You have a box for your pets. You're in the box, that's what you're thinking about. In order to think about another subject, you have to process out of one box to go into another. Otherwise, it's just difficult. Men have 2 giant boxes that are bigger than all the other ones because we spend time in there and it's easier to get in and out of them. One is called the empty box. That, the wife will ask you, honey, what are you thinking about? What do we say? Do they believe you? No, they don't believe you. Why don't they believe you?
They don't know.
Right. Because everything's connected to everything. What's the other biggest box that we have? Starts with an S, rhymes with X.
Sex.
The sex box. Yeah. And what it is that these 2 boxes, the empty box and the sex box, we can get into and out of at any time without processing out of any other box. It's just the nature of how we think and how we are. And so this is dramatically important. Again, when I learned this and I talked to my wife, she has a degree in psychology. Like, are you kidding me? She already knew this stuff. I'm like, guess what I'm learning? Oh yeah, you didn't know that? Why did she know that and me not? Right? Yeah, she's already studied it. She's got it remembered. But when I was able to learn this dialogue and knew that she understood it, she could come to me when I was thinking about a project and say and just rattle something off, and I would say, I'm sorry, I'm not in that box right now. Do you think that helped here? Absolutely. Do you think that helped here what to talk about? Absolutely. Now, it's just a rule of thumb. We can move in and out of them. Men can think like spaghetti, women can go into box thinking, but it's just a rule of thumb. I would highly encourage you to research this or look at it or come back to us for a detailed training through transformational leadership. Okay. The theme of this slide, or the theme of what it is that we're learning right now about knowing what to say in advance, is really about knowing yourself. These are aspects of yourself that you need to learn. I'm transactional or relational. I know my love languages. I know that I think like this. There are other tools out there that we don't have time to go into that I highly encourage you. When I went through them, they dramatically changed my ability to smooth talk my wife. For example, Myers-Briggs. Absolutely love it. Strength Finders. Go for it. Spiritual gifts. I mean, it fits right in there with love languages. When you study these things and know about yourself, it changes your ability to do this. So again, these are practical tools. These are things that you could literally go out and do tomorrow. So transactional and relational, I've given that to you now. Think about it. You can apply that today. It can help your communications. Waffles and spaghetti, you can apply that today. I mean, this stuff is the stuff that I've picked up on along the way that I think is golden, that we need because of how it affects communication. And I'm saying for the longer term, wow, look into some of these tests, because the more you know about yourself, the more you can effectively communicate. But what happens when you learn more about yourself? You also learn more about her, right? And if you can show interest in that you're trying to make progress in these areas, have her take a Myers-Briggs. There's 16 different results. So there is a single video for how a single one of the 16 relates to another one of the 16. I don't know what the math is on that, but that's like 500 some videos. If you know yours and hers, go look up the video, and it tells you literally how you communicate, your styles, your strengths, your weaknesses, activities you like, things you shouldn't do. It's incredible. Why haven't we tapped into it as married men in the church, right? Sure. This is what I would recommend. Connect with us. I'm going to leave information here about how you can sign up for our mailing list. I'm building out our website on this because this is so vital. I've realized how many people are interested in this, how many people need it, and I will be sending these resources out. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible that if you want these things, you can sit back and wait. But you do need to come to our website and put in your email ID. I'm going to show you how to experience a calm mind in 99% of situations. Would anybody find that useful?
I do.
Okay. So yes, that is a picture of me. So, I want you to write this down. This one's going to move quick. Anger comes from 3 places. It comes from fear, pain, and frustration. And I'm going to go into a lecture style where I'm just teaching you. Normally we do discussion. It helps you learn better retention, but we're going to move quickly. It comes from fear, pain and frustration. So the next time you get angry, I want you to ask yourself this question: where is it coming from? Which one of the three? Which one of the three? Can it come from more than one? Absolutely. Can pain be frustrating? Of course. But here's what I want to suggest. Search for and apply the opposite. Now I'm going to give you these, and again, I would highly encourage you to write these down. If we're experiencing fear from something, how can we absolve that fear? There's two ways. Fear is a lack of knowledge. Trust can fit in that category. So go after knowledge, right? If you're afraid of something, go learn about it. You'll all of a sudden find that you're not quite afraid of it. The other way we handle fear is faith. There's a belief component that comes on the other side of fear. If we know we're being obedient, but we're not sure we should do it, but God said, hey, go do this, and you're afraid of it, there are times when you just have to have more faith. So when you run into anger due to fear, identify it, and then ask yourself, do I need to have more faith or do I need to go learn something? Because if you absolve the fear, guess what happens to the anger? It resides. Pain. Pain is a tough one. You can experience pain on an ongoing basis. If I've got a knife sticking in my side and it's not been removed, it's not exactly like that pain's going to go away. However, if the pain if the knife isn't there, the stimulus isn't there, what you're looking for is healing. So if you're experiencing anger due to pain, figure out how to go after healing. Okay? The last one is frustration. This one's a little bit more difficult, but I'm going to give you a scripture reference for it. When you're encountering frustration, what you want to do is examine gentleness and humility. The opposites of these two are anger and pride. Here's where it comes from. Jesus says, my burden is heavy, but my yoke is light. And then right after that we miss this. He says, learn from me. And then he tells us, walk in gentleness and humility. Now, if you apply what I just said, if you're walking outside of gentleness and humility, what happens to the yoke? It gets heavy. How many people might be walking around with a heavy yoke? Anybody? If you're feeling the heaviness, look at gentleness and humility. And if you can be gentle and be humble, what you will find is the anger that's coming from frustration will reside. And you will see throughout what it is that we're discussing naturally where the scriptural and biblical principles align. I don't necessarily need to teach those. I've been taught those my whole life. And so when I pull these nuggets out, you'll see where they line up, and that's a good one. Taking control of your thoughts. Let's talk about what anger does. When you get angry, does anybody know the chemical that releases in your brain? It's responsible for fight or flight. Adrenaline, also known as epinephrine. Adrenaline dumps straight into the frontal cortex, and what it does is it disables your rational processor by up to 50%. It makes you stupider. How many people can feel when the adrenaline goes off? I can feel it. Some people, it goes off so heavy, the rational processor trips out and they black out. That's why that happens. Why is the rational processor being disabled for adrenaline? You need it for fight or flight. What you have to do in a survival situation isn't always rational, right? And so it's brain chemistry. Now, here's the effects of adrenaline being in the system. It also triggers what's called cortisol. It comes from stress. And what cortisol does is it'll tell your fingernails to stop growing. It'll tell your hair to stop growing. It'll reduce your metabolism. It weakens your immune system. So the more you have adrenaline coursing through your system, the more cortisol you have coming through your system in stressful situations, the more your systems are shutting down. Is that yoke getting heavier? It's coming from anger. It's coming from anger. So you need to understand the effects that anger actually has on the brain. And I wish somebody would have taught me this, because once you understand the flip side of it and you start using these things to your advantage, it changes your awareness. Before we go into this, I do want to talk about the power of expression, and I'm going to share a quick story. I know we're running late. Sorry, Josh. My wife and I were told that we can never have kids. I have an 8-year-old. I've been married for 16, coming up on 17 years. So it was 11 years before we had children. I will argue the point of having gone through it for so many years that it is almost identical to the death of a child. And Josh and I have had this conversation, and here's why. Is because when you go through infertility, you're not just experiencing the death of an individual, you're experiencing the death of an idea of that individual. And you're not experiencing it once, you're experiencing it over and over and over. And in between, your hopes go up, then they get trashed. They go up, and they get trashed. It's awful. God awful. So in the throes of infertility, my wife and I told her, I said, look, God's showing me Abraham and Sarah. I know we're supposed to have a child of our own. And her response was, yeah, but I don't want to be 99, Grant. Told you she was smart. She's just that fast. And so there were times and this is about the expression and expressing the frustration and the anger and honesty and what this does to our brain chemistry and how it translates to our relationship with God. Some of the most honest prayers I had in my life were, God, I hate you. I hate you. And what happened is that those prayers made me closer to Him. Do you know why? Did he react to those prayers? No. He didn't love me any less. I got up the next morning. He was still there. Right? And so sometimes in the anger and in the frustration, we have to be honest with God. And it drives us closer to Him, and that is an important part of this process. So you had to turn the tide on the energy levels, right? We just talked about how it can get sapped out of us. I'm going to tell you, this is probably one of the most important elements that I've learned. Of all the things I've learned about marriage, this was the game changer. And I'm telling you, I didn't learn this stuff in the past year, maybe 2. It was because of transformational leadership. The emotional gas tank. We talked about how to get stupider on purpose. We talked about how to shut down your biology, right? We're going to talk about how to put gas back into the tank. This one is an easy one. These are things you want to write down. We forget that there are simple things that actually bring endorphins back into the brain. Go for a 5-minute walk. How many times we see ourselves at the computer sitting there? We know we're getting drained. Get up, walk for 5 minutes, and come back. Put on a song that you like. What that does is you're activating your other senses. I've learned to do this one. Get a candle and light it. And light it every single time that you need to feel encouraged. Guess what happens when you walk into a room and smell that scent? You're encouraged. You just activated your olfactory senses, and so you've got these things working for you. And again, we forget that these little things actually help put gas back into the tank. And so I'm going to ask you to write down the things that you like, that you're not doing on a regular basis, that you should be doing, that take such little effort with smartphones in our hands to just flip on a song, write some things down so that you can deliberately put things back into your gas tank. This is not about behavior. This is about brain chemistry. And I'm telling you, when you do these things, it starts putting endorphins, it starts raising your serotonin levels, and it starts prepping you to be able to respond to oxytocin, which is how we bond in relationships. We're going to talk about changing your actions and changing them quickly and effectively. And this one is the most important one. This one is the one that changed everything for me. I want you to right now think about those target things that you do, say, actions that you're like, I shouldn't have done that. Whatever it is, a harsh word, quick to discipline, something. I want you know where they're at in your mind. You've been there before. This time we're going to be proactive about it. So what I want you to do is just take a moment and get one of them in your head. And I'll tell you right now, mine is the way that I react to my wife. I will snap at her when she says something. For like simple things. It wasn't her fault. So get it in your head. Now I want to ask yourself, what is it that you're feeling when that happens? I'll give you my example. When I snap at my wife, it's because I've typically done a lot of work, a lot of positive things, and she comes in and asks about the one thing that I didn't do, or criticizes something about the way I did do it, making me feel like I did it wrong. So what am I feeling in that moment? What are the 3 causes of anger? Feeling frustration. Bang. Whoo. Right? So I want you to identify your feeling that you're having in this situation when you're behaving in a way you don't want to. Next, I want you to go after the thought. Because I'll tell you, I'm going to use an example here. I got up one morning, I was early, like, oh, I don't need to be up. I had 15 minutes, pile of laundry on the floor. I'm going to fold this and put it away. She's standing in the bathroom getting ready. I pull the clothes out of the basket, so I have a clean basket to put empty basket to put the laundry in. As soon as I do it, she says, "Can you not put the clean clothes on the floor, on the dirty floor?" And so, bang, a terrible response, just god-awful response. So what is it that I was thinking? And this was pivotal for me. What I was thinking is, why don't you appreciate what it is that I'm trying to do? And I had to unpack this one because what I figured out is I had a need to feel appreciated by her. Like, wait a minute, is that her job? Is that what she's supposed to be doing? Right? Is it her responsibility to make me feel appreciated? No. And so by using this process, I actually found a faulty thought process. And here's what I did. I actually went for help with this one by my mentor. And I changed the thought to, I am so thankful that you're willing to communicate. You love me so much that you're willing to communicate to me what's important to you. Catch that? Now, with the new thought that I had, what did it prevent? The adrenaline dump. So now when that happens and I say, man, you love me so much that you're willing to communicate with me honestly, I now have 50% more of my processing power present. Right? It was literally a chemical reaction. And so I chose the new thought. And so what we call this is TFA, thoughts, feelings, and actions. This is the biologically attracted to her. How many feel that you'd have a better connection with your wife if if you could feel that she was attracted to you, right? Anybody?
I do.
Okay. I know we're breakfast is settling in. So do you guys think you can apply what we've learned so far? I mean, are these helpful? Okay. If you did these things, do you think she would notice? Okay. Typically, the things that we've discussed so far, they might take a little bit longer for her to notice. But the one I'm going to share with you, she'll notice right away. So this is a fun one. This is about being intentional. If you're intentional with all those other things and combine it with this, it's powerful. If you just try to use this one, you could be setting yourself up to actually punch yourself in the face. So the number one way that a woman experiences emotional intimacy, does anybody know what it is? It's not physical. It's not verbal. It's eye contact. They teach this on secular dating websites on how to get women into bed quickly. Why in the world are we not teaching this in the church? That you have 50 zygomatic muscles connected to your eyes and your smile that activate when you smile. And so what you want to learn to do is smile with your eyes. When you do this, I'm telling you, go home and do it. Smile at her with their eye. Give her the look. Give her the look. What's the first thing she's going to say? She'll go, what? She'll notice it right away. But what you don't realize is it's triggering her biology. Okay? And so you need to use this. 2 other ways of non-sexual physical contact to do this is to touch her in a non-sexual way. The most effective part is in the small of the back. Almost equal to it is right here on the front side of the elbow. Now, this one's a little bit more advanced when you're getting to that spot, when you want to trigger her biology and you want to turn it into a physical action. What you do is you lean in right here, close, make her feel uncomfortable, and you take a deep breath. And you say this, you smell nice. What happens next is up to you. So I'm telling you, these are things that you can use to trigger this. So this brings us to our conclusion slide. And so what happened is that I sat up in bed and I heard that voice say, if you keep going, this is what you're going to get. And immediately I zoned on the word if. I didn't hear anything else. If. And I said, if you're telling me if, that means I have a choice. And if I have a choice, I know what your word says. And within 5 minutes, I was on the phone. And I said, we need to meet. And she said, okay. We agreed that we wouldn't tell anybody else or bring anybody else. But without telling each other, each of us went to an elder at the church we were and asked us to pray. And so what happened is that we got back together that day and we talked for 3 hours straight in the parking lot of Crestview Hills Mall. And we can't to this day explain what happened. God crucified what it is that we had put together, and He resurrected something new, and it's been there ever since. But I can tell you in the things that we've come through, and this is the point of what we were talking about, is that, that last slide isn't up there, is that everything that we've talked about here is what's enabled us to go through divorce, infertility. We've been through bankruptcy. We've been through financial scams of millions of dollars. They had to file suit with the FBI. But in the end, it all comes back down to the deep connection, because we've now realized after 17 years of marriage that pretty much there isn't anything at this point that's going to take us out. So let me see the slide real quick. So I just want you to take a look at the list on the left and the list on the right and tell me whether or not you think what it is that we've covered on the right matches what we said we would do on the left. And that's all.
Grant, thank you for coming in and talking. Definitely appreciate it, guys.
Okay.